Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. On today's episode, we're talking about the players your club should have bought this summer. Listen to our thoughts about the Premier League star that Chelsea should have signed.
Only Erling Haaland is averaging more shots a game among regular starters in the Premier League this season.
Brilliant. The star who could have solved Arsenal's problems.
He's good enough to do so many things. I would have been more than happy to see him step in for someone like Martin Odegaard and try to bring Arsenal back out of their shell a little bit, which they've obviously shrunk into.
And our thoughts about why Mbappe's move to Real Madrid hasn't worked out. That clinical side to his game has just gone. Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. And myself and Mikey have a real treat for you. It's freelance football journalist Sam Tighe in the building. Formerly of The Football Show, does the Transfer Talk podcast as well. Been seen on Sky screens, been seen on everyone's screens, really. Sam, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolute pleasure. We've got a hell of an episode lined up for you guys today. We are going to discuss the players your club should have bought. No, we know it's mid-November. We're not ruling out these transfers as complete flops, etc. But there maybe are some players that are looking like more sensible options for your club that they could have signed in the summer. So let's get straight into it. Mikey, who do you want to kick off with?
Let's kick off at Chelsea. So we've got three suggestions each of transfers that have not gone to plan, or I think in some cases transfers that we didn't really fancy in the first place, and have gone probably just about as well as we thought they would have done. And I think this is the case especially with Chelsea. And to be fair, like Enzo Maresca has done a pretty admirable job so far at Stamford Bridge. I think he's built on what was actually some really good work that Mauricio Pochettino did last season. I think it's very it's very easy to have a short memory over this. It's easy to look at what Chelsea are doing now, especially in terms of their place in the league table and their style of play, and say, well, this is down to Maresca, and he's obviously conducted himself very well with the media. He's been quite ruthless with certain decisions around the squad in the summer, which I think helped to streamline this Chelsea team a little bit, and all those things are true. But I think you still have to remember that that Chelsea were playing some excellent football under Pochettino at the end of last season as well, and Maresca has also done this despite another relatively chaotic transfer window. Think about the amount of squad turnover that was still happening in the last couple of weeks of the window, and you look at the squad turnover in general, and in particular, the signings at attacking midfield, Joao Felix and Kieran Dewsbury-Hall. And, there are still massive question marks over those signings. And in the case of Joao Felix, which is what we're going to focus on here because he was the more high-profile signing, he cost more. It was, of course, completely tied up with the Conor Gallagher deal going the other way. And so, there was a certain necessity about it. And to be honest, there aren't that many other players out of Atletico Madrid that Chelsea could have been like, this player is exactly what we want right now. Whereas at least Joao Felix was someone who'd played at Chelsea before, had looked good in pockets for Chelsea,
and post a lot in his loan stuff.
Yeah,
that's what I abundantly remember.
And was actually quite liked by the fans as well. Even if he was generally fairly ineffective, over the course of his loan spell. There was still some promise there, and it was still an area where Chelsea needed some backup, but equally, you look at it now and it's just pretty dire reading. Of course, Cole Palmer, is number one in that 10 position. He just isn't going to budge there. But the fact that they signed Dewsbury-Hall and Joao Felix, and neither of them are yet to make a start in the Premier League, I think is really damning. That they're limited to those, to that Europa Conference League squad pretty much, aren't they? 5 substitute appearances for Felix, 3 sub appearances for Dewsbury-Hall, who's barely even making the bench. I think the last time he made the bench was against Liverpool potentially, but just once in September. Joao Felix hasn't even come off the bench against Newcastle, Liverpool, Man United or Arsenal. So it begs the question whether Chelsea really needed, well, they certainly did not need to sign 2 players in that position, that's for sure. And that's why I've gone for a player on the wings, actually, because I think that was
the
another
one they should have brought in.
as someone they should have brought in, and that seems mad, doesn't it? Because Chelsea have bought an abundance of wingers over the years, and are very well stocked in wide positions in general. But one thing I didn't necessarily see coming was Pedro Neto being primarily used as a left winger this season when they signed Jadon Sancho in the summer as well. It felt like Neto would be used primarily on the right as a left footer as well. Noni Madueke, great start to the season, and his shot numbers are really good, but I still feel like they need competition there, and at this moment in time it's just Madueke. But it's a difficult one because they're still so well stacked. Cole Palmer can play on the right as well if needs be, so it's like, who do you sign there? Do you sign like an aging right winger who can just provide some competition for a couple of years?
Chelsea don't sign aging players anymore.
They don't. And it's a sad thing. So I went for someone who was more in the kind of mid-range, and someone who he may well have cost quite a lot of money, but I don't think he would have cost as much as, say, Johan Bakayoko at PSV. He probably would have been he was kind of the in the top 3 right wing targets in the summer, but was very expensive out of PSV. I've gone for Antoine Semenyo out of Bournemouth.
Ooh, nice.
I don't know what you two think about this, but
What start to the season?
I love
start to
Semenyo.
the
I think
season.
he's amazing.
Yeah.
So it gets my vote of confidence for sure. I mean, I get a different style of player for
Yeah.
sure, but it's good to have those different styles. And I quite like the fact that on the left they've got almost like a thunder and lightning combo with Neto, who is like the thrust that he has in his game, the direct speed and the willingness to just peg it down the line is very different to the way Sancho tries to neatly manoeuvre his way into the box. They're very different, and you can kind of use them in different ways, so you can plan for your opponent quite nicely. And yeah, if you were looking at Madueke and Semenyo, you were also looking at a very different style of dribbling, a different way of carrying the ball. And I think probably Semenyo, a more forceful and direct style of play, which would give you a nice compliment. You're right, he's had an amazing start to the season. He sort of popped up onto my radar about this time last year when he really started to stand out to me as someone who never ever stopped driving at his fullback, no matter how it was going. And those are scary players. Those are the players that fullbacks don't really want to play against. And I think Semenyo is showing early this season that there is a real case for him to be stepping up the ladder pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it seems pretty evident, doesn't it? I think like the noise is coming from kind of Bournemouth fans of that. Yeah, he's not going to be here for that much longer, but that's fine because of what he's given to the club under Araula, and that's actually you touched upon it there, Sam. Like the what makes Semenyo stand out to me is the fact that he is a right winger, but he is right-footed as well. That's different to Madueke. We've seen that with Neto and Sancho. Neto far more likely to go on the outside on his left foot than Sancho. It gives Maresca a lot of options, and I think Semenyo's numbers this season and last season they're just frightening. Only Erling Haaland is averaging more shots a game among regular starters in the Premier League this season than Antoine Semenyo. Like it's pretty scary, and he's already getting up to his kind of expected goals and assist total for the entirety of last season this season. And when you consider that Bournemouth have played Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Villa, so the top 4 from last season, and also played Newcastle and Chelsea after 11 games, as it's just evident of a player who is able to take on elite defences now. And I know that Man City's defence isn't as good as it was last year. Arsenal's defence isn't as good as it was last year, but Liverpool's defence arguably better than it was last season. In a Premier League context, he does seem ready for an elite move. So that's why I've gone for Semenyo. I feel like the only stumbling block for Chelsea now would be the price. He's now contracted there until 2029, but he signed that contract in July. And I think Bournemouth clearly wanted to get that contract signed before too many vultures came swooping in, especially with Solanke on his way to Tottenham in the summer. So it was a smart move from them. But if there'd been a bit more forward planning from Chelsea in the summer, I know they were dealing with PSR stuff, so the start of July wasn't exactly clearly they didn't have all their targets set out at that point. But, had they been more forward-thinking, I think Semenyo would have been a much better option than either Joao Felix or Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's speculation that he's been sort of earmarked as a potential Mo Salah replacement at Liverpool, already, which is absolutely fascinating, along with Brian Mbeumo, apparently they're looking at from Brentford. Sam, who is your first player that you think they should have bought someone else?
So I'm actually going to go for an outgoing Premier League transfer to start us off,
Ooh.
and I'm going to go for Emerson Royal, who went to AC Milan over the summer, a move that started to rear its head quite early in the summer. The chatter was quite strong, and I immediately thought, when you get a gut instinct on a deal, you read a rumour and you either say yes or no in your head, right?
Yeah.
And this one was a very firm no. Just no. And the longer it went on, because Milan dragged their feet on this for a very long time, I thought Emerson was about a week away from doing a Peter Odemwingie turning up at the San Siro car park in his car saying, please sign me. He really, really wanted to go, but it took 6, 7, 8 weeks for this transfer to elapse. I thought the longer it went on, the more likely it was that Milan would find someone else that was a better fit for their incoming manager. But eventually it did go through. And I say it's a bad fit because they appointed Paulo Fonseca as manager over the summer. He is renowned as a possession-based coach. He was at Lille beforehand. And Emerson doesn't really fit what I think Fonseca tries to achieve. I was quite confused by the pursuit. And in fact, looking at the reports and speaking to a few people about Milan's right-back shortlist, it was a very confusing shortlist to begin with anyway, because it consisted of 3 players, one of which was Emerson, who I think is probably were too defensive and not good enough in possession to be that top team influential right back. There was also Matty Cash, who's a good player, but I'm not convinced also he would actually have lifted Milan's level too high. So again, would you really want to spend the money on that if it's not a clear and obvious upgrade? And then the third player on the list was Thiago Santos, who was at Lille with Fonseca, and he was the right one. I'm pretty astonished that this didn't happen as a double deal, or Fonseca didn't walk in the building and say, right, I'm going to bring this guy with me. The deal would have been able to be done for sure. Milan had a budget for one of the 3. They picked their favourite. I am surprised that the favourite ended up being Emerson Royal. And if you look at the early stages of his Milan career so far, it's not been a disaster, but there's a lot of posts on my timeline from Milan fans going, all the Spurs fans warned us about this, and yet we still did it.
Yeah.
There's been some consternation with his performance levels. And I come back to the point of tactical fit. It doesn't work. He was never, at Tottenham, a particularly good possession-orientated or attacking right-back. His skills were more found in a defensive set. And he was never really this player. I wonder if it's just because he played briefly for Barcelona, has he been miscast as an attacking right-back? Because he certainly didn't show much evidence of it in the Premier League. Or before, I am one of those people that watches youth tournaments, and I watched him play for Brazil at under 18 or under 20 level, I should say, and he wasn't particularly good in the attacking phase then in a Brazil team. All the clues are starting to add up here, and yet it happened. So I've answered my own question with who should it be. It should have been Thiago Santos. He would have been the perfect fit. He has been ruled out for the rest of the season, I think, with an ACL, but we're kind of time machining our way back to the summer here,
exactly.
when Thiago Santos was fit and available and right there. And they didn't do it. Yeah,
absolutely. And it felt like Paulo Fonseca's probably needed a few more allies in this Milan squad at the start of this season. It's not been a particularly happy camp. I think Theo Hernandez and Rafa Leao, who get on particularly well, have had some issues with Fonseca. He's kind of been quite harsh on Rafa Leao, and up until basically the last 2-3 weeks before the international break, Rafa Leao had really struggled so far this season, which, given the fact he's Portuguese and had spent time at Lille previously, it felt like maybe that was kind of the key to Fonseca's success at Milan. And they are cut adrift in this Serie A title race already, which is involving pretty much every other top side except for Milan. So not an ideal start to the season, and Fonseca's under huge pressure for his job. Having said that, they did just beat Real Madrid in the Bernabeu, and that was the only game I've seen this season. I didn't actually watch it. I mean, the review afterwards, because I was watching, I think Liverpool-Leverkusen was on the same night. I hedged my bets that was going to be more entertaining. But after that, a lot of Milan fans were like, that was Emerson Royal's best performance yet. So he has turned up in 1 or 2 games, but not regularly enough. So that's a little bit troubling. I'm going to move on to my first player, and the Bernabeu is relevant here too. It's a big one, and it might rattle few people's cages. But there is a discussion to be had about Kylian Mbappe's start to life at Real Madrid. And look, saying that Real Madrid shouldn't have signed Kylian Mbappé is a very big statement to make 16 games in.
It's
especially
crazy.
The fact he was on a free transfer. He was a Real Madrid fan, grew up with posters of Cristiano Ronaldo on his wall.
I thought he was a Milan fan.
No, I think he was a Real Madrid fan. Or maybe he's a Cristiano Ronaldo fan.
He's certainly a Ronaldo fan.
I think he's part of that generation that just sort of idolised players rather than teams. Maybe he's a Milan fan. I think
AC Milan should have signed Kylian Mbappé instead of Emerson Royal.
Play him at right back.
Certainly would have been more attacking at least.
Yeah. But it was obvious that, if you got the opportunity to sign Kylian Mbappé, you'd be a fool to turn that down. And I think, you don't really need to go into it, but he averaged 1.2 goal contributions per game. During his time at PSG, obviously won the World Cup there. He established himself as Messi sort of heir as the best player in the world. I think at his best, he is the best player in the world. So you can see why they went for it. But has it been a happy time at Real Madrid so far? Not at all, I would say. It's 8 goals in 16 games, which for any normal player would be a pretty solid return, having joined a new club. But this is not any normal player. We are talking about, as I've already said, the best player in the world. The expectations are that much higher. He scored 6 goals in La Liga, 3 of which have been penalties. No player in Europe's top 5 leagues has scored more penalties than him so far this season. And look, penalties have to be scored, but it hasn't really been the sort of inspirational signing that you expected. And bizarrely, it's just what we used to know him for, being that cold killer in front of goal that's kind of deserted him. His shots per 90 are at the highest they've been in his career, but his shots on target per 90 have been better than 4 of the last 6 seasons. And he's now scoring with just 0.06 goals per shot, which is the same as Ryan Yates at Nottingham Forest. That is a little bit troubling. That clinical side to his game has just gone. And you might ask, is he being really creative? Are his dribbles really up? Is he helping progress the team up that way? Not at all. The sort of relationships that you'd expect to be forged at this stage of a season, look, it's still early days. I'm not ruling him out as a complete flop, but it hasn't really clicked. And his chances created down massively from 1.7 last year to 1.3. And he's now averaging 0.09 expected assists per 90. That's less than Ashley Young at Everton. Like, this has just not been
do you not
the
think
signing we expected.
Do you not think this is just like an elite player just getting to grips with a new system, new players around him? Do you not think it will just... It feels like to me it will just click at some point. I seem to remember kind of, Ronaldo seasons in the past where he his shooting seemed to have kind of left him, or at least his clinicalness seemed to have left him for a couple of months, and it felt like, is this the end? And then it was fine because he was still averaging like 5 shots a game, and it just came back around, like he just found it again. So I feel like, I think the discussion around whether Mbappe, I think where I do kind of agree is, was Mbappe stylistically the best fit that Real Madrid could have gone for this summer if we're taking out like opportunity of the deal, him being on a free, etc. Like, I think that is a conversation for sure. Like, stylistically, Mbappe was not the perfect player to come into this Real Madrid team. But I just think, the fact that it was such a big opportunity for Real Madrid to take and he always wanted the move means that it's, I can't really get behind it, but I see where you're coming from.
It's a pretty gluttonous move, though, isn't it, for Madrid? Because they're still right to sign him, even from the standpoint of, well, you can't let him go anywhere else. And he's available on a free transfer. He can go and sign for somebody else, and God forbid, from their perspective, he signed for Barcelona, which is probably what they've, that's what's kept them awake at night, fearing that kind of thing, because those two clubs, they consistently tried to sign players to prevent the other one from getting them. Look what they've done in the Brazilian market over the last 5 years, where they've gone head to head for Vinicius, then Rodrygo, then Vitor Roque, then Endrick, and every time it's them trying to one up each other. So there is an element of football transfers that is, I'll have him so you can't. And I can kind of get behind that from a very selfish perspective. But it has been a bit of a rocky road for Mbappe so far, and we all know that he's not a number 9. He's pretty much publicly stated that he doesn't like playing there. So to then sign him as your brand new sparkling number 9 is a bit odd. There's been troubling comments from Carlo Ancelotti, where he's been asked, have you considered swapping them, Vinicius Junior and Mbappe? And he's been like, to the effect of, well, why would I take away my best difference maker from his best position? Which is a bit like, he's talking about Vinicius there as the alpha attacker, because he has the history and the pedigree, and he's currently doing it. Like, last time Real Madrid played, Vinicius scored a hat-trick. He was phenomenal, you know? So this has been a very concerning start. I think it's actually gone pretty much according to a lot of people and how they thought it would. Yeah. Because we all asked the question, well, how do those two coexist? So far, the answer is, we're not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a slow start and then a little burst of scoring, and that's just 1 goal in his last 7. And we do keep on mentioning this free transfer, but it was a free transfer only in name, because he signed a £128 million signing on bonus to be paid across the next 5 years. His salary is actually comparatively low for a player of his status. I think it's just £12.8 million per year, which for a player of Mbappe's status is not very much at all. But that signing on bonus is absolutely massive. In terms of who they should have signed or could have signed, look, it's a little bit, as we all have kind of acknowledged, like if you get a chance to sign Mbappe, you probably just do it because it will work out eventually. And even if he carries on at this scoring rate, he'll probably score 30 goals this season. And, you know, Real Madrid, yes, they've lost 3 games already. That's more than they lost in the entirety of last year. But they're still only 6 points away from Barcelona with a game in hand, having not played particularly well so far this season. It's not been a disastrous move, but a player that they could have potentially signed, and either on the short term or long term, who is 9 days younger than Mbappe and has experience solely playing as a number 9, who is available this summer, is Victor Osimhen. And I really like Victor Osimhen. I think people in this country are quite disparaging about him because, A, he's got a pretty shaky injury record, to say the least. I think in the last 5 years, he's missed over 10 games in all of them, which is a little bit troubling, except for the year where Napoli won the league. I actually need to correct that. But his scoring record's absolutely remarkable. In the 4 seasons he was at Napoli, he averaged a goal every 125 minutes in the league. Harry Kane over that time averaged one every 118. So just 7 minutes difference. And consider that Kane scored 36 league goals alone last season for Bayern Munich. He does play it, of course, every minute, Harry Kane, and hates being taken off. But that does speak to just how effective Osimhen is. Osimhen was so clearly available, particularly, it was at the end of the window. They'd already signed Endrick. They'd already signed Mbappe. The timeline wouldn't have worked out. But you knew Conte wanted to get in Lukaku. You knew once they got in Lukaku, they couldn't afford to keep Lukaku and Osimhen. And I'm surprised that more teams didn't make more of an effort to sign Victor Osimhen. He's already started to really click at Galatasaray. Amazing performance against Spurs in the Europa League last week. And he was so gettable. I think he's obviously not on the level of Mbappe as a player, but is he a better 9 than Mbappe? Possibly.
I'm trying to think of other number 9s who Real Madrid could have gone for, but
some people will probably be shouting Gyökeres. But
yeah, I mean that's certainly a possibility as well. But I think
big
in terms
step, though. If you go back to June, that's a big step,
huge
step for Gyökeres.
Coventry to Real Madrid in the space of 18 months. I mean, I think. In many ways, Osimhen would be a great fit because he'd kind of just be expected to kind of hang in the box at Real Madrid. He wouldn't actually there wouldn't be as much pressure on him in terms of build-up play, even though he's brilliant at that and holding up the ball as he had at Napoli, because the advanced midfielders at Real Madrid do so much of that already. Vinicius is such a big ball carrier, I guess, in a way that Nketiah is at Napoli as well. To be fair,
was really special as well.
So I think, and I think Vinicius does. Vinicius and Osimhen would have been able to spark something up like that. Massive. I guess the saving grace for Madrid is that if Endrick really comes on in the next 2 years, then maybe that Mbappe problem just gets solved.
But where does he play? On the right?
Maybe, or plays split strikers. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of surprised actually that Ancelotti was so adamant at getting back to that kind of 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1 formation, because last year the split strikers with Bellingham in that kind of weird kind of second striker false 9 role worked so well for them for so much of the season, and it kind of felt like Mbappe, Mbappe taking Rodrygo's place as that second split striker with Vinicius, that made a lot of sense to me.
Harsh on Rodrygo,
it is, of course.
Because he had a brilliant season.
It is really harsh on him, but it still makes more sense than shoehorning them.
In the next 3 windows, Rodrygo's surely leaving.
Do you think?
Yeah.
But then
I can't see him. There's just not enough space for all these stars, especially with Güler coming through as well. I think he deserves more game time and more of a stage.
I don't know. I think
amazing salary.
It completely depends. If Ancelotti goes for something different and Mbappe ends up taking Rodrygo's place in the team, then perhaps. But at this moment in time, it feels just difficult to see Real Madrid letting go a player of that caliber. But
guys,
we'll see.
Let us know what you thought about the Mbappe situation? Should they have signed Osimhen? Let us know your thoughts. Let's move on to our next one. Sam, why don't you go next? Who's your second suggestion?
Yeah, we are taking a couple of steps down the football ladder on this one.
I like it.
And that is no disrespect to the player in question, but we've just finished a conversation about Mbappé, Vinicius and Rodrygo. So I'm going to talk about Eddie Nketiah here.
Huge.
Nice. Look,
Also a better stylistic fit for Real Madrid. You could argue.
an actual number 9. And that's part of the problem here at Palace, actually, unfortunately. But I'll start by saying that it's never a good sign, straight off the bat, that when a player is supposed to go to one place and then the deal gets called off and then 5 days later he just goes somewhere else, usually starts to make me feel a bit uncomfortable. Like, it's the end of the transfer window. Nketiah had a deal agreed with Nottingham Forest. He was supposed to go. Reportedly, the deal fell through due to personal term disagreements. 5 days later, August the 30th, note the timeline, late in the window, he is unveiled at Crystal Palace. Was there the appropriate amount of due diligence and attention paid to respective fits at each club? Because Palace and Forest behave very differently on the pitch. Nuno's deep block versus Oliver Glasner's high press. I mean, in the context of Premier League tactics, does it get much more different? Does Nketiah fit in the same way at Palace that he did at Forest? No, not at all. How did you end up here? And my answer to this question, it is my own guess, but Nketiah was so desperate to leave Arsenal and play football that he didn't necessarily pay too much attention to the role that he was expected to play. And he's not playing up front, is he? He's playing most of his football just off the striker in one of those two supporting roles in a kind of front three with two number 10s who are also kind of wingers. Why would you play Eddie Nketiah here? Like, the most number 9 of number 9s you can think of. The channel-running, poacher, goal-scoring instinct, Eddie Nketiah. Why would you play him anywhere other than number 9? The answer is because Jean-Philippe Mateta exists. And unfortunately for Nketiah, Mateta is probably better than Nketiah. He certainly offers more in terms of an all-round game. Hold-up play, link-up play, energy. Mateta is very good. And unless he's injured, Nketiah probably isn't going to get to play the number 9 role. So you have to find another place for him in the team. The fact that he cost 25 million rising to 30 million means that he almost demands a place in the team. And the fact that you lost Michael Elise means that there is a space open, presumably. But it's not the kind of player that I would pick for that kind of role. So I find myself asking the question, why did Palace not try and find a player who skill set suited the striker role and that supporting role a little bit more equally, that balanced out a bit better? A player that can go in either role. That's what I would have done with the money. I wouldn't have signed a number 9 and said, well, unless Mateta's injured, you're going to have to play there. Time to learn the position. Nketiah is deceptively, he's 25 years old. Like, he's not a young up-and-coming prospect who can learn his trade and maybe convert as a winger. Like, Nketiah is what Nketiah is, and he's not that. What Palace are using him as is that's not the player that he is. So I found this one very confusing, and ultimately I put it down to desperation from both from both parties. Nketiah, desperate to play, didn't necessarily look into exactly what that role would be, and Palace started so poorly, desperate to spend some of that Elise money on some goals.
Yeah. And Edouard having left the club as well. Like, if Mateta got injured, they were really short of number 9 options. I see it more from Palace's perspective, interestingly, than Nottingham Forest, who already had Chris Wood and Awoniyi. Like, neither move were great for Nketiah.
Agreed.
He ended up in quite a tricky situation, maybe, and maybe that forced his hand.
Agreed, yeah. There is a stat here that underlines this in terms of the awkwardness of Nketiah and the position and the role that he's playing. No player in the Premier League has taken more shots this season without scoring a goal than Eddie Nketiah. It's 17 and counting. This is very likely a product of him being in, from his perspective, quite literally the wrong area of the pitch. Yeah. Taking shots from the wrong area of the pitch. And I feel for him a little bit here. And I think Palace could have done a lot better with this acquisition and this money. And I personally, if I was in charge of the transfer kitty, some might say it's a good thing I'm not, I would have signed Jonathan David from Lille. So it's my second Lille player. Yeah. I want to apologise to Lille for just taking all of your players away from you. But Jonathan David, this may seem a bit of an ambitious get for a lot of people.
I feel like now, though, maybe not so much. I feel like so many clubs have passed up the opportunity to sign Jonathan David that a Premier League club with top 10 ambitions, that kind of feels like the right move for Jonathan David at this moment in time.
Agreed. Although he's obviously he's now playing Champions League football, so
and doing it well.
So people would ask, well, why would he go to Palace if he can play Champions League football? He's just played against Real Madrid, and that's a very fair question. But when Evan Nilsson moves to Bournemouth, everything is on the table, my friends. Like the financial power of these Premier League mid-table clubs these days is quite beyond anything we've ever witnessed. And if Bournemouth can spend 40 million on a striker, then Crystal Palace can sign Jonathan David, I promise you. So the good thing about David is he does actually match that skill set very nicely. He's been playing up front as the number 9 for Lille this season, but he's got bags of evidence of playing as a support striker. He played support striker the entire year that Lille won the title, handful of seasons ago. He supported Burak Yilmaz up front in that incredible season where Lille won the title. He was the support striker, and he was brilliant at it. He plays up front for Canada. He moves in and out of that role for Lille. This is a player that perfectly fits the position that Eddie Nketiah has found himself in. You play here unless Mateta is injured, and if he is, we need you to fill in.
I like it. Do you think there's a reason that he hasn't gone to, and no disrespect to Lille, like a bigger Champions League club?
I couldn't tell you, honestly. Yeah. I don't know if it's just simply a case of the bids never quite came in. There was some skepticism from maybe the price being charged was too high, but he's out of contract at the end of the season. He's going to leave Lille, and he's going to leave Lille for free. You feel like this summer just gone, 20, 25, 30, literally the Nketiah fee, he's out.
I like it. A very sensible suggestion from Sam. Bring him to the Premier League, Jonathan David. Mikey, who's your next one?
I'm going to Arsenal now. And it feels, it feels very easy to bash Arsenal's summer business at this moment in time because they're not in the best place right now. I do expect Arsenal to, really get back amongst the title race again.
People are already being quite harsh on Mikel Merino, I've seen.
They are.
Which feels particularly brutal given the fact he was out for 5 weeks with that shoulder injury. He didn't really get a pre-season.
Yeah, absolutely, and getting used to a new team, and especially I think he's come into a team which is far more defensive than he was probably hoping for when he got that move. I think he's putting up about 6 tackles and interceptions a game. I mean, he is one of the biggest tackle monsters in the Premier League, and he always had that to his game, and his aerial ability was obviously a huge draw for Mikel Arteta. But we're yet to see like Mikel Merino, the ball, the supreme ball progressor yet, because Arsenal have just not been anywhere near as good at progressing the ball as they have in seasons past. So, yeah, it does feel a little harsh, but at the same time, Arsenal did spend a decent amount of money on a 28-year-old central midfielder when they could have put some of that money towards an attacker. And that's the area where they've really been lacking so far this season, especially when Ødegaard was out injured. I know he's back now, but it may take a little while for him to get back to his best. We even saw at the start of last season Ødegaard take a couple of months to really get to his best level.
He did start well against Chelsea.
I've got to say, for a man that had been out for however many weeks, for him to play 95 minutes against Chelsea at that intensity, I was very impressed with him.
But yeah,
he might be still tired from that though.
He may well be. And after an international break as well. I just think Arsenal can't solely rely on him, and that's been part of their problem this season, hasn't it? Has been that absence, and I think partly that's down to Arteta's tactics. Maybe he should have had more faith in the system even without Ødegaard. But it still begs the question: should they have prioritised an attacker in the summer or a creative player in the summer? And I think they absolutely should have. And actually, the player under the move under the microscope here is Raheem Sterling. And again, similarly to the Nketiah deal, this was something that happened on deadline day. This was a player who was desperate to leave his club or had been effectively shown the door at Chelsea and was desperate for game time and desperate for a positive project to join. And this one, unlike the move previously talked about, unlike Joao Felix, unlike Emerson Royal, this made sense. This felt like it made a lot of sense in terms of Raheem Sterling coming in and joining up with a manager who had such a big influence on his career at Man City and Arteta, joining up with a lot of former teammates, not having to move, not having a huge amount of pressure to deliver straight away, but joining up a team which had a system which would facilitate his best aspects.
Playing both sides.
yeah, like it seemed to make a lot of sense, and yet he just hasn't been used anywhere near as much as I thought he would have been. 2 starts in the league, 2 sub appearances. He's actually played more minutes across 2 League Cup games than he has across the entire Premier League season so far. And I think it was particularly telling, and I think this was when, people really started to pick up on it, the fact that he wasn't used in that 1-0 loss to Newcastle. They were trailing from the 12th minute, Arsenal, and yet Nwaneri was brought on for Martinelli and Zinchenko brought on for Merino on 60 minutes. Gabriel Jesus was then brought on for Trossard. 5 subs were used in the game. Sterling remained on the bench. And you just think, if Arteta isn't looking to Sterling as one of his 5 options to try and turn the tide against a very beatable Newcastle team, then I just wonder when his moment's going to come this season. I think, that's been the kind of prevailing narrative, is that Sterling is ready to be called upon whenever. He's having a good time at Arsenal. He gets along well in training. He's a good positive voice in the dressing room. He's a good role model for the young squad there. Like, all of those things may well be true, but I think it still remains true that Arsenal could have gone for a more punchy long-term target in attack during the window, when clearly for a long time we have been, wondering what it would be like if Saka got injured, or if Ødegaard got injured, or, there are still question marks over Gabriel Martinelli on the left. He's still yet to get back to the form that, helped propel title challenge in 2022-23, and that's where I've gone for with my selection. And he is a punchy target. He would have cost a lot of money, but I think, if Arsenal had sacrificed, getting another defender in Calafiori, or had decided against Merino, then I think they would have been able to stump up the money for someone like Alex Baena at Villarreal. And I really like Alex Baena in an Arsenal context because he can fulfill that left wing role in a very different way to Martinelli. He is much more of a technician. He's actually not that much smaller than Martinelli, but he certainly has that, he's a bit more of a Spanish kind of player in that sense, in that he's very much about the footwork. He's not necessarily a flying winger, even though he is pretty fast. He's a creator over a goal scorer. He was creating almost 3 chances a game last season. This year it's gone up to 4.
He's been on fire this season.
Yeah, he's been brilliant.
Villarreal have had an amazing start to the season, and he's been central to all of it.
And even last year, where they were uncharacteristically poor at the back under Marcelino, like, their attack was still flying, and that has a lot to do with him. And I just think, and also, Villarreal play in a 4-4-2 as Marcelino does. And yeah, he would have genuinely been a much better fit in Arteta's 4-4-2 than Martinelli has been, because, Baena is just used to that role. He's used to defending from the front as well. I think since the start of last season, I don't think anyone in Europe's top 5 leagues has more assists than him. I think also ranks in the top 4 players for chances created as well. Pascal Gross and Bruno Fernandes, 2 of the players above him in that sense. And he also likes to cut inside and take up space between the lines. I just think, given, and yes, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but given Arsenal's lack of options to replace Ødegaard in that system, I think Baena could have done a job there as well. Like, I think he covers both of those bases, and I think that has been a bit of a problem for Arsenal, especially with Trossard's form dropping off a little bit. And in some ways, they just need a long-term replacement for Trossard, because he's, he turns 30, I think, next month. Baena is an upgrade on him in almost every aspect, and is 23 years old. I think, for Arsenal, it's not even just short term as well. I think if Arsenal want to be big title challengers in the long term, they need to upgrade that forward line. And there was so much chat about, right wing, up front as well in the summer. I think, someone who is just an elite creator and can play on the left as well. I think, talk about that was pretty quiet, and I don't think it should have been.
So I think you might have actually done him a little bit of a disservice there, just in saying that, you would even maybe have a look at him stepping in for Martin Ødegaard. I think he'd be great at that, like, genuinely great. Even if you played him as a kind of more of a right-sided number 8, I think he's good enough to do so many things. that I would have been more than happy to see him step in for someone like Martin Ødegaard and try to bring Arsenal back out of their shell a little bit, which they've obviously shrunk into, given the injury. And really, the problem you're tying into here is the fact that Arsenal sold Emil Smith-Rowe, got rid of, loaned out Fabio Vieira, and didn't do anything to change the squad depth in that position following those moves. And Baena would have been a really healthy presence on the left, a really healthy presence on the right, and a really healthy presence in the centre as well. You could have, it's almost 3 birds, 1 stone if you're able to get the finances together to do that. Now, we didn't really know how much money Arsenal had through the summer. We were always kind of speculating as to how big they might be able to go. Obviously, they clearly left some of their powder dry until the very last moment, because how on earth do you even afford a quarter, a half of Raheem Sterling's wages if you don't have something left in reserve? He was on 300k plus a week at Chelsea. So you've obviously got a bit of money there, and they were waiting for something. Guess that money could have been used on Baena.
Yeah,
potentially.
Absolutely. It's a good suggestion, Mikey. Felt like a bit of a tap in there, missed opportunity by Arsenal. Right, let's get through our next couple. Next, I'm going to talk about Philip Jorgensen at Chelsea. I'll do this quite quickly because obviously he signed in the summer. It was a £20 million fee from Villarreal. Chelsea and goalkeepers, they've got a lot right, this new committee, but they haven't nailed their goalkeeper situation. I think it's fair to say. I think it's 6 or 7 signed for around £80 million combined. Could they have used that money more effectively on one single goalkeeper? Yes, almost definitely. You know, would someone like Mike Maignan have been interested in joining Chelsea at some stage over the last 2 years? There's maybe a conversation to be had there. Does he raise the level of that Chelsea side? Massively. He's a top 3 goalkeeper in the world, Mike Maignan. And, you know, the struggles of Milan this season are well documented. What's going to happen in his future? Not totally sure. Could Chelsea have gone in there? Absolutely. But Philip Jorgensen felt like an interesting call because he'd only played 1 year of senior football at Villarreal. And yes, it was a solid campaign, you know, a very solid save percentage, a positive record against his expected goals conceded. But you just thought that he was going to have more opportunities to therefore establish himself in Chelsea's first team this year. And I say first team because it is quite crucial or quite evident that they have a first team that plays in the Premier League and another team that plays in the Conference League and the League Cup. And yes, Jorgensen has had minutes against Barrow and Newcastle in the League Cup, and he started against the likes of Servette and Panathinaikos in the Conference League. But I don't think anyone's been able to get a grip on how good this guy is on the basis of his performances and Chelsea's performances in a competition that they are by far and away the most stacked in terms of quality in that competition. You know, Betis and Fiorentina, very entertaining sides this year, particularly Fiorentina, but Chelsea really should be winning the Conference League with the money that they've spent. Who should they have signed? I think they probably just needed to sign anyone of top level quality because Robert Sanchez, you know, it hasn't been a disaster in terms of their goals against. I think it's 13 conceded in 11 games. His save percentage is actually only topped by Alisson in the Premier League. But I don't think this is where stats just aren't always a useful.
Well, now hang on. The
picture.
stats are useful because he's made more errors leading to a goal than any other goalkeeper in the league. I think he's made 3 errors.
Notable ones. You know, not coming out. You know, being stuck on his line, not closing down Curtis Jones, who ends up scoring from about 4 yards out at Anfield. Bringing down Højlund against Man United. And what is missing from Chelsea's season so far is a real statement win against the top 6 opposition. And Sanchez is just holding them back. He's actually the key reason why I'm still not sure that Chelsea are going to finish in the top 4 this season. They've got a chance, but I'd be so much more confident if they signed a top goalkeeper. Who was available in the summer? Georgi Mamardashvili from Valencia, who subsequently went to Liverpool. And I kept on saying in the summer, Chelsea fans, just go and sign Mamardashvili. Like, he's coming off an amazing year at Valencia. He saved over 10 expected goals. Only Di Gregorio and Donnarumma saved more in Europe's top 5 leagues. Had that amazing Euros with Georgia. Prevented over 4 XG. Got them into the knockout stages where they lost heavily to Spain. But Georgia were one of the stories of the entire tournament. And people kept on replying to me, oh, he's not good enough with his feet. He's not good enough with his feet. Arne Slot thought he was good enough with his feet for the future of Liverpool. Like, clearly, he would have been an upgrade on Sanchez, who, I'm sorry, has made a number of errors with his feet anyway this year. Yeah. Against Brighton, I think his long-range passing's pretty poor as well. The bar of an improvement on Sanchez, I don't think is particularly high. And Mamardashvili was right there. So that is one that has hugely frustrated me. Right, Sam, your final one.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see how this goes down, because sometimes I think this guy looks quite good, and then other times I think really just no. It's Guido Rodriguez at West Ham. And it's a weird one to broach because at surface level, it does feel like everything's kind of going okay. Like, he started all 11 Premier League games so far. That usually means that, he carries the manager's trust. It's typically a signal of strength. But in 2 of those games, he's been hauled off, once in the 38th minute in a 3-0 loss to Chelsea and another at half-time against Forest, despite the fact that Edson Alvarez had already been red-carded in that game. So you'd think in the scenario where Edson Alvarez, the holding midfielder, has been sent off, you'd probably need the other holding mid. He took him off as well. A lot of these games that you're watching, West Ham's midfield, okay, it's not functioning particularly well. And as a team, they're not functioning particularly well. But you watch some of the goals they concede, and you play a little game. Where's Guido? What's he doing, and where is he? And he's actually getting
off of Where's Wally?
Yes, he's actually getting completely swallowed up, unfortunately, by the sheer speed and physicality of the league. And this is a 30-year-old World Cup winner who has got an illustrious career, has played really well in La Liga, very, very good for Real Betis, was linked to Barcelona. He ticks every box on paper. But not every player gets to a different league and actually thrives and really takes advantage of the situation. And I think he's genuinely, in those games that get really stretched, and let's be honest, it's most of them in the Premier League, he's really struggled. I think if West Ham could calm down a bit and just keep hold of the ball a bit more, he'd start to look a lot better, which I'm pretty sure was the plan to start with, moving away from David Moyes into Lopetegui and Lopetegui signing him. I'm pretty sure on paper I can see where they were going with it. But so far, West Ham's season has not gone to plan, and one of the biggest weaknesses in the team as a result of that is the midfield, and one of the biggest culprits, I think, in some games, unfortunately, has been Guido Rodriguez. In those moments where it slows down, he starts to look pretty good, but rarely does the Premier League slow down. And there is another stat here that did surprise me. Even when he does get on the ball and start to try and dictate things, he's played fewer progressive passes per 90 than Vladimir Soufal and Thomas Souček, who are 2 players that West Ham fans would accept, as much as they may love them, aren't the best on the ball.
No.
And 2 players that I think, with the new direction that West Ham are trying to take, they're actually trying to move on from those players and move on from that style and move towards something else. And yet Guido is actually underperforming in that metric as well. So I do find it a little bit difficult because I respect Guido, and he's had a very good career, but sometimes players come over from different leagues into the Premier League, especially in midfield, and it just doesn't work. Like I'm reminded of like Jordan Veretout, moving to Aston Villa and just sinking like a ship, and sometimes it happens. And I'm really sorry, Guido, but it's not looking great at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's around a new system, how well they're adapting off the pitch to a new country as well. There's so many different factors that go into transfers that we don't always see when we're watching the 90 minutes, like whether he's getting along with his teammates, etc., whether his kids liking school. All these are like minor factors or that can all contribute towards player performance. Who knows what's going off the pitch? But I haven't been super impressed with Guido Rodriguez either.
So to replace him, or not replace him, but to sign instead of him, I would have gone for Ben Sheaf at Coventry City.
Interesting.
Who would not have any concerns about whether or not he could adapt to the country or fit into the league, because we all know that the Championship is the ultimate Premier League proving ground. And if you can take being kicked up and down the pitch 46 times a season in England's second tier, you can more than survive with the pace and the throttle of the game in the top tier. That we all know that. It's been very well established over the years. Centre-backs, midfielders moving up the leagues, they can deal with it straight away. And often some of the best young talents, wingers in the Premier League, have done a bit of a vocation, haven't they, in the Football League. Someone like Harvey Elliott going to Blackburn and getting some pretty rough treatment has made him a better player. And if you can come through that, you can come through anything. Ben Sheaf he's built strong. He's built very strong. He uses the ball well. He turns out of pressure really well, and he dominates physically in duels. In the summer, he would have been available. Coventry City are not a team that can sit there and decline strong bids for their best players. They just can't turn them away. And he's probably someone that I would have looked to there for a more immediate hit.
Love that. Love that. Wonder whether Lopetegui has any knowledge of Ben Sheaf. Maybe not. but his scouts, should have. Mikey, who's your finale?
Well, I'm actually sticking on West Ham now. We're keeping it at West Ham, and yeah, I guess it does feel like maybe the technical director Tim Steiten, as much of a great career he's had, especially by Leverkusen, it does feel like West Ham's window hasn't served them particularly well this season, and this one's a bit unfair because he has been injured since the end of August. But Nicholas Füllkrug, even at the time, felt like a puzzling move for West Ham. I know they've tried seemingly tried almost everything in the striker market over the years.
About 15 years.
Yeah. When's Michy Batshuayi signing?
I feel like he's already played for them, but he hasn't.
The phantom Batshuayi move. But yeah, Nicholas Füllkrug just didn't feel like, 31 years old, didn't feel like, certainly, even backers of the move would have said this isn't a long-term option. Felt like a weird move at the time. Now looks even worse. He's got this niggling Achilles injury that just isn't going away. There's still no return date penned in for him. And, I just think, 12 goals for Dortmund last season, has an impressive record for Germany as well. But I don't know, it just already feels like West Ham are going to be going in for a striker again next summer. It just feels like that's definitely going to be the case. Antonio cannot be relied upon anymore. They've got so many other great attackers there, and the likes of Kudus, Paqueta, even Bowen are still not getting the forward thrust that they need, and Paqueta's creative numbers have been way down, and that's slightly informed this decision as well. I think there were a lot of strikers out there in the summer that West Ham could have targeted.
Evan Nilsson,
Evan Nilsson
was 40 million, but what was Füllkrug? 30.
Although I do feel like Evan Nilsson, for some reason, to West Ham, there's something about that move which I just feel like inevitably wouldn't have come off.
Is that because he's a striker that signed for West Ham?
A striker that signed for West Ham.
Ultimately, their record is... it doesn't really matter who it is at this point.
For sure. But I just feel like coming from another league, I feel like it would have been, I don't know, just the pressure would have been so high on his shoulders. And I just feel like that the London Stadium atmosphere could have got to him, especially if he'd, missed his first penalty. And that yes. West Ham crowd, just I don't know, just the vibe there could turn. Whereas at Bournemouth, I just feel like it's a more forgiving crowd, and also playing at least in a more established system at Bournemouth has really helped him. Whereas I think someone like Matheus Cunha could have come into West Ham and could have rolled with the punches a little bit.
Wolves selling another star.
I mean, yeah, it would have been a difficult one to get out of Wolves, but maybe before that Pedro Neto moved to Chelsea, I think Wolves could have listened to offers, and yes, they paid 50 million euros for him the season before, but West Ham spent nearly 30 million on Füllkrug. Like, I think another 10-15 on a player 6 years younger, with more Premier League experience, more versatile, not just a pure goal scorer. Like, West Ham, actually, that's the thing. West Ham don't actually need a 15-plus goal a season striker. Like, Somerville scored 19 in the Championship last year. Bowen scored 16 in the Premier League last year. Like, they don't need a striker who does that. Antonio has sorry?
Kudus and Paqueta can chip in.
Exactly, yeah. Kudus, we're still yet to see him put up double figures, and he's perfectly capable of it. Antonio, I can't remember the last time he put up double figures in the league. Like, that's not been where his strengths have lied. And yet Cunha did score 12 goals in the league last year, only one of them being penalties. He's already got 5 goals in the league this year. His shooting from long range is very impressive. His link-up play, of course, is very impressive. He's a decent dribbler. He's very, very strong. He can carry the ball from the halfway line. It just felt like a bit of a no-brainer. It feels like there's a few of those kind of strikers knocking around like that. How, like, even Joshua Zirkzee, who has come in for a lot of criticism at Man United, is more of a better fit in this West Ham side than Nicholas Füllkrug. I just feel like a really good facilitator like Cunha, who has a bit about him, is, has moved around a number of clubs now and has found his home now in the Premier League. Even in a struggling Wolves side, he has looked really, really good this season. Felt like a no-brainer for me at West Ham.
He's got like exceptional goals in his locker for sure. He pulled out a number of them for RB Leipzig, I seem to remember as well. His performance last weekend against Southampton or prior to the international break was amazing as well. I really like Matheus Cunha as well. Divides a lot of opinion though for some reason.
He's awesome.
I think he's brilliant.
I think he's absolutely fantastic. I love a player like that can do so many things for you. And I think it's a very fair point to mention his facilitation, because sometimes you do need a striker that is 50-50 on facilitating and goal scoring. Like, you only have to think back to the BBC combo of what Benzema was able to unlock from his wingers in Bale and Ronaldo, to refer to a really successful forward. And obviously Bowen and Somerville is not quite that illustrious. However, a lot of West Ham's team is geared towards getting Bowen on the score sheet. So play to those strengths. Use a striker like that. And I think Cunha's magnificent.
It's a top player. Right, to wrap up, I feel like we're maybe finishing on 2 injury-prone players, which feels a bit brutal. But Federico Chiesa hasn't really worked out at Liverpool so far. And I remember saying it in the summer, like, I'm not quite sure about this move. And so many people replied being like, it's £12 million. Like, it's not going to break the bank for Liverpool. And I thought, yeah, fair enough. How bad can it go? And I don't mean to stick the knife in, because this is a guy that's consistently struggled with injuries really since Euro 2020. So the last 3 years, he's missed 79 games for Juventus in that time. So far, since joining Liverpool, and we're now in mid to late November, 77 minutes of action. And Arne Slot has spoken publicly about the fact that he just can't stay fit, and that he just continually picks up small injuries. He didn't have a pre-season, which can't have helped as well, or it was disrupted by the move. And it has been far from ideal, because Liverpool in the last few weeks, with Diogo Jota injured, have been playing with 4 forwards, and they are 4 quality forwards. But this would have been a great time to rest Mo Salah occasionally. They are still top of the Premier League. He's played in every single game. He started every game in the league and Champions League, Mo Salah. And look, the guy's a genetic freak. He never gets injured. He never really drops below an 8 out of 10. But he's getting older. Having Chiesa there to ease him into the side as the side is playing so well, and then potentially pick up minutes on the left, pick up minutes on the right, that would have been really, really nice. So the player that they should have signed, I really like this guy. I think he was very, very gettable, and it's Francisco Conceição. Went on loan to Juventus from Ajax. Had spent last season back on loan at Porto, playing under his dad, Sergio Conceição. Had a failed move to Ajax, then got loaned to Porto, and then joined Juventus in the summer on loan for this year. They've got, I think it's a €30 million option to sign him permanently in the summer. And on the basis of his performances so far, they'll 100% take that up. He's been brilliant. 2 goals and 4 assists already in 10 league and Champions League games, but he's only started 5 games. So he really has been an impact sub so far. And that maybe affects the numbers I'm just about to say, but it's been a really impressive start. He's now at 0.75 expected assists per 90, which is the best record in Europe's top 5 leagues. That will come down, but anything above 0.45, anything above that sort of region is really, really impressive. And he's had some phenomenal games, not least against Leipzig in the Champions League when they were down to 10 men. And he can pick up minutes on the right-hand side. And yes, maybe the plan was to use Harvey Elliott more in that position, who hasn't been fit so far this season. Maybe even Dominic Szoboszlai could allow Salah a bit of a break. But Francisco Conceição, either on a loan move, but to then potentially sign next summer, I just think would have been a really sensible move from Liverpool. And yeah, they weren't really at it this summer in the transfer window. Maybe Slot wanted to assess his players over a year and then make some big moves. Chiesa being their only key signing for this summer was a big surprise, but Conceição was right there, and I think he started really well at Juve.
I mean, look, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and we have spent some time here exercising it. But I don't blame Liverpool for trying it with Chiesa. I was certainly in the camp of 12 million. I think that's worth a gamble. Of course, the last thing you want for a traditionally injury-prone player is to be injured for the entire start of the season and barely play. They've had to give him a mini pre-season after pre-season because he wasn't fit enough to play pre-season. So he's so far behind. And history tells us, or history would suggest, that he basically won't catch up this season. Look at Sofian Amrabat from last season, was basically frozen out of Fiorentina's squad the whole summer, waiting for the move. Man United really dragged their feet on that one, took him at the last moment. He didn't play any pre-season. He wasn't fit. I think he played his first good game in about game week 36. It's really hard to catch up. So, without wanting to sound like too much of a doom-monger, but Fede Chiesa's first season at Liverpool already feels like it's a bit of a bust. Now, of course, there are more opportunities this next year and the year after. But what is it about his injury record that's giving you any hope and any optimism? And there's not an awful lot so far. It's a huge shame because he is one of the most thrilling players on this planet if he's fit.
Yeah, just not been fit enough recently. Guys, that is the lowdown for another week. Those are the players that your club should have bought. Do you agree with our suggestions? Do you think any of them are crazy? Let us know in the comments down below. Huge thanks to Sam Tighe for coming on the show this week. If people have enjoyed your presence, Sam, where can they find you?
Lots of different places. I did a fair bit of work for Sky here, of course, but other places as well. Written work, podcast work, video work. And I'm on Blue Sky, Tighe Football.
Love that. Guys, thank you so much for watching the lowdown for this week. We'll catch you next week. Goodbye.